It's a really beautiful morning here at Fringe venue number 1 in Brighton Fringe at Pavilion Gardens Cafe, which is also the informal headquarters of FringeReview, which was born in Brighton, if you didn't know. Let me just give you a little look. Here's the cafe, here's the Royal Pavilion Gardens. And I'm just reflecting on conversations in the last week. It tends to happen, I think, usually in the first week. We're coming towards the last week of the Fringe, and I haven't got round to this. But it's to talk about rogue reviews. And what is a rogue review? Well, there are different ways of defining that. But for me, what I picked up on, it's where a company might have 4 or 5 consistently positive reviews for their show, and then they get a 1-star or a 2-star, and it starts to upset somebody. It could be the whole cast. It's often the director or the producer. And what the rogue review is saying about the show is significantly different from what all the other reviews are saying. And the 5-star reviews, and there's a lot of star rating, we don't use stars, you might get an outstanding from FringeReview, are saying very specific things and often are in agreement about the brilliant writing, the performances, the originality, the impact, lots of things. And the other review seems like the person was seeing a different show. 2 categories here, I think. One is the rogue review of a reviewer who also has very good background, might be known in the field as a critic, knows their stuff, but has written very, very differently from everybody else. And there might be things to learn from that review. And just remember, I've said this before, the paradox, if you really genuinely think that the review is wrong, is the more attention you give to it, every time you click on it, the more that will keep it in the public domain on things like Google. You'll be doing their search engine optimization. And so it's probably better to save it and just read it if you're obsessing over it. I don't recommend you obsess over reviews, but we are only human. But don't keep reading it online. The rogue review might outrage you because the things they're saying about your show might be inaccurate. And I think if there are factual inaccuracies, without getting obsessed, writing to the reviewer in many cases will lead to corrections. It might often lead to a bit of a negotiation. You might not get any replies, but it can be worth making an attempt to write, not in an aggressive way, to a reviewer and challenge their view. Some reviewers and publications are very much open to that process, though I would say quite a few are defensive and may not reply. And there's a thing about ego that's not just in arts and theatre makers who love their work, but reviewers aren't out to ruin your shows. Though I will say there are certain reviews, rogue reviews, where somebody does seem out to ruin a show, and it's often written in the review, which is quite often where they seem to have a beef, they seem to have an attitude against a certain type of show. And in Edinburgh last year, rather, I think, outrageously, people are saying, if I see another neurodiversity show, well, why did you go and see it if you're already deciding what to write? So at one level, it's the incorrect, the inaccurate review that's making it rogue, and it could be that the person simply didn't get it, and it could be that a bit of explanation might lead to the review being at least changed or withdrawn, although that is rare still. The other rogue review isn't about inaccuracy, it's that it's genuinely rogue, and you can't for the life of you think why they've written that. And sometimes it is simply, and there's a huge increase not only in reviewing at the kind of anyone can set up a website end, and they're getting press accreditation at things like the Edinburgh Fringe in some cases, but also it can be that a top journalist has been brought in to review theatre, who is a sports journalist, and that was definitely going on at least a couple of years ago, that the idea that any journalist can see theatre and artwork is crazy. And so in both cases they just don't know what they're looking at. And they won't accept that they've made a mistake. And what often happens with rogue reviews is somebody's actually unaware of their own mood. They're reviewing the contents of their head. They are not aware of their bias, they're not aware of their attitudes, they're not aware that they were in a bad mood, and often they will write, I was in a bad mood, so this wasn't funny. And that's not the same thing at all, particularly if the rest of the audience are laughing. I would say those rogue reviews can be damaging to your show if it's at the level of a big publication. And I think it tends to be rare, but it does happen. I often notice it with film reviews that a lot of the usual film critics will give something a 4 or 5-star review, and then it's 1 star in another newspaper. And For me, there's a number of principles here. One is believe in your work. Don't be upset by those reviews. If you pay them less attention, they don't really mean that much in the long run, and they do disappear on the internet. Do they affect ticket sales? I would say not really, particularly if it's a rogue review. Certainly what some companies have done is they've quoted the rogue review alongside all the good ones and made it look ridiculous. Like, I remember one huge post, I'm trying to think which show it was one of the improv shows that literally had a 1-star review about their show, and everyone else had given them 5 stars, so they put it on the poster, and it does actually help to sell the show. So a rogue review can be an opportunity for marketing as well and make the reviewer look ridiculous. Particularly, you might get a really good pull quote, the worst show I've ever seen, along 5 reviews that say the best show I've ever seen. It's just obvious. But what I noticed in the Fringe and in conversations are people getting obsessed by their reviews, and it's starting to affect their well-being, their experience of their own Fringe, and they just can't let it go. And having the ability to let things go is really important at the Fringe, because there are ups and downs all the time, and you will certainly at some point in your career get a rogue review. There can almost be a rule that the more you experiment and try and do something different, that people who write rogue reviews that don't like originality, they don't like people that take risks, they feel annoyed by it. It could be jealousy, is that they write a rogue review to somehow bring it crashing down to earth. Ultimately, humbly, it's worth seeing if there's anything in the review that's got an insight that you can learn about, but the other one is simply to put it in the drawer and believe in your work and get on with things. But certainly the people I'm talking to have brought it up enough for it to be sticking in them like a knife, and that can't be good for anybody. And rituals of letting go are simply about, if it's affecting a whole group, sitting down, reaffirming what was good about their show, what you believe about your show, and if you've had good reviews and you believe them, is to remind yourself that you've had good press as well. But what I wouldn't do is spend hours plotting the downfall of the reviewer, scheming, and what often happens too is character assassination. It could be that a rogue review is sincerely written, the person doesn't mean harm, they might even be correct, and what you're doing is calling them a loser. You're saying that they've got it in for you, they haven't got a life. You start looking up their life, you start disliking posts, and it's just crazy. It's a loss of energy and it never pays off. What I find interesting is the more creative conversation, which is where it's possible to invite the reviewer to come and see the show again, to just engage them in a bit of social media banter, to say I'd love to chat to you more about your review, is enemies turn into friends. Dialogue often resolves things. Then there's clarity, and that's when a reviewer might change a review and say, I realise I'd got that wrong. And that comes from some grown-up, mature conversation where we respect each other. But I do understand if you're in a state of fury and depression about a review, it's very, very hard to unstick it from your ego and to let go of it. But ultimately, you might get one. And I would say now, as I've said before, that's about who you also want to let into your show and to specify. And if it's new work and you've taken a big risk, you might want to curate who comes to see it. And that's happening more and more. And press tickets cost a lot of money. And reviewers work hard to write their reviews, though not all do. And there are, tweeted or X'd reviews that are just one line. Do you want that person in on a £10 ticket if all they're going to do is, and you've never met them before, you've got no idea about that background, and you don't know what they're going to write? I'm not sure I'd want to do that, in the same way I'm not sure I might go to a doctor if they're not qualified, and so I would say more and more now, if the stakes are high and ticket prices are high and more people are reviewing on all the different platforms, it's just to be a bit more careful about who you decide to let into your shows in the first place.